Have you ever had one of those moments when the world suddenly shifts? 1 second, everything is normal, you're just going about your business, and then everything changes. That's exactly what happened to Emily. One night, she was doing what she always did, working as a waitress at a high-profile gala, serving guests, quietly doing her job. But then, in a twist no one could have predicted, she was called up to speak. You're probably wondering, how did this happen? Why did they ask her to speak? Stick with me for the next few minutes, and I promise you, you'll have your answer, one that might just change the way you see the world around you. What would you do if a single moment in your life altered everything you thought you knew? Keep watching, because this story is about to unravel, and by the end, you'll see exactly why this seemingly random event is way more significant than it first appeared. Now, let me ask you this: how many of us feel like we're stuck in the same routine, going through life without any real spotlight? You get up, go to work, do what you have to do, and at the end of the day, you're left with the feeling of, is this it? You're doing what's expected of you, staying in the background, unnoticed. But what if one unexpected moment, one decision, could catapult you into the center of attention? What if that one moment was right around the corner, just waiting for you to recognize it? That's what happened to Emily. But before I tell you what happened next, let's take a step back. You need to understand who she was before this night changed everything. Emily wasn't someone you'd typically notice at first glance. She was just another face in the crowd of waitstaff, moving around the glamorous ballroom, serving drinks, smiling, and nodding to guests who probably didn't give her a second thought. She had worked her way through countless events just like this one: elegant, extravagant galas where the rich and powerful mingled while the waitstaff stayed behind the scenes. But tonight was different. There was something in the air. And no, it wasn't just the champagne. Emily didn't know it yet, but the universe was about to pull her into a story much bigger than herself. But that's not the end of it. Because this night would reveal more about Emily than anyone could have predicted, and it would reveal something about you, too. Why am I telling you this? Because I know you've been in Emily's shoes. Maybe not in a gala, but in the daily grind of life, we all face those moments where we wonder, could I be more? Am I meant for something bigger? And how do I break out of the shadow of the everyday to reach something more meaningful? Well, Emily's story isn't just her story, it's a story that's going to make you reflect on your own life. It's a wake-up call for anyone who's ever felt overlooked or stuck in a situation that doesn't reflect their true potential. At that gala, everything was supposed to go according to plan. It was a perfect night, at least, that's what everyone thought. There were speeches, networking, deals being made in the corners, but none of that really mattered to Emily. She wasn't there for the spotlight. She was there to do her job, blend into the background, and go home. But then, something unexpected happened. The host, someone who had never even spoken to Emily before, pointed her out. She froze. Her heart raced. She was just a waitress, right? What could she possibly have to offer in a room full of powerful, well-dressed people? You might be thinking, that's ridiculous. Why would they ask her to speak? She's not a guest or a keynote speaker. She's just serving drinks. Well, stick with me, because this is where it gets interesting. Emily didn't know it yet, but this was the moment that would change everything. And as crazy as it sounds, that was the start of a ripple effect that would echo through her life and possibly yours as well. You're probably asking yourself, what did she say when she was called up to speak? Was she terrified? Trust me, you won't believe what happened next. But before we get there, let's pause for a moment. Picture yourself in Emily's shoes. How would you feel if you were suddenly thrust into the spotlight, asked to say something in front of a room full of strangers, people whose opinions could impact your life in ways you can't even imagine? Would you shrink away, or would you rise to the occasion? This is what makes Emily's story so compelling. It's not just about her. It's about how we all react to unexpected challenges and opportunities. How many times have we been in situations where we felt completely out of place, but somehow, we found a way to step up? Emily wasn't just stepping up. She was about to reveal a side of herself that no one, not even herself, had seen before. When she was called up to speak, she didn't have a script. She didn't know what to say. But in that moment, something shifted inside her. That shift, the transformation that was about to unfold, was what I want to talk about next. Because when you find out what she said, it'll hit you in a way you didn't expect. This isn't just some random incident in a gala. It's a story of self-discovery, of rising to a moment that's bigger than yourself. I can already hear you thinking, okay, enough with the build-up. What happened? I promise, I'm getting there. But remember, this is a journey. You see, Emily's story isn't just about a single moment, it's about the series of events that led to her being there, at that very spot, on that particular night. And the truth is, if she hadn't been in the right place at the right time, if she hadn't been ready for that one chance to step forward, everything would have remained the same. She would have just been another face in the crowd. But here's the kicker, you don't have to wait for a gala or for someone else to give you that opportunity. Emily's experience is a powerful reminder that moments of change don't always come in grand, dramatic ways. Sometimes, they come when you least expect it. And I'm telling you this right now because I want you to take a moment and think, what's your gala? What's your chance to step up, to speak, to make an impact? You're going to want to watch the next part of Emily's story, because this is where everything really starts to unfold. The next steps will shock you. Emily's decision to speak out in front of that crowd? It didn't just change her night, it changed the trajectory of her entire life. And the best part? It could change yours too. You'll understand why by the end of this video, but before I get to that, I need you to stay with me. Trust me, the story is just getting started. So, what did Emily say when they asked her to speak? And how did it all end? That's what I'll reveal in the next part of the video. But for now, I want you to reflect on this. What's stopping you from stepping into your own spotlight? Are you ready for the moment when it's your turn to speak up and change everything? Stay tuned, because I promise you, you don't want to miss what happens next. Before we get into the exact moment Emily was called to speak at the gala, let's take a step back and understand the context behind her being there in the first place. You see, Emily wasn't someone who typically found herself at high-profile events like this. She wasn't from a family with wealth or status. In fact, her background was anything but glamorous. She'd worked tirelessly for years, juggling multiple jobs to make ends meet, and often found herself in the shadows of people with more money, more connections, and more opportunities. But somehow, Emily had managed to scrape together a decent life in a small city that didn't have a lot of room for dreamers. She was used to fading into the background, being one of those invisible people whose hard work went unnoticed, who just made life a little easier for everyone else without expecting anything in return. Yet, something about this particular night seemed different. It wasn't the usual crowd. There was an air of tension, an undercurrent of something more than just an ordinary gala. The event was being held at a luxurious, sprawling mansion on the outskirts of the city, with marble floors, crystal chandeliers, and the kind of opulence that felt almost out of place for someone like Emily. There were whispers in the hallways as guests sipped their champagne, their voices hushed and hurried. But the real mystery wasn't the mansion or the people attending, it was the strange series of events that had led Emily to this particular job at this particular night. She had been hired on short notice, a last-minute replacement for a fellow waitress who had apparently dropped out due to some unforeseen circumstances. It wasn't unusual for Emily to get calls like this, temporary gigs were a dime a dozen, but the way she was selected for this event felt odd. She had barely spoken to the organizer before being booked, and there hadn't been any formal interviews or background checks. It just happened. What had been so special about this gala that they had to bring her in, someone they barely knew, to serve drinks and food to the rich and powerful? And who exactly was behind her sudden placement at this event? It didn't add up. But as Emily brushed the thought aside and went back to her duties, she couldn't shake the feeling that something more was at play. She wasn't the only one who seemed out of place that night. The guests themselves were acting strangely. Some seemed a little too eager to network, others too absorbed in their own private conversations, as though there was something they weren't saying out loud. And then, there were the security guards. They were positioned at odd intervals around the room, standing in places that didn't make sense, their eyes scanning the crowd with an intensity that felt unsettling. Emily had seen her fair share of high-profile events, but this felt different. The whole evening had an air of secrecy about it, like everyone in the room was hiding something. She wasn't the only one on edge. But even as Emily felt this building tension, she continued with her work, taking orders, delivering food, and gliding across the ballroom floor with a practiced grace. Her mind, however, was constantly circling back to the oddness of the situation. Why had they chosen her? Was there something about her that made her stand out to them, or was this all just a bizarre coincidence? Then, out of nowhere, she heard the host's voice boom over the microphone, cutting through the music and conversations. "And now," he said, "we have a special surprise for you all. A young woman who has been serving us all evening, but who has yet to be introduced. Let's give a warm welcome to Emily." Her stomach dropped. She wasn't prepared for this. She hadn't been briefed on any kind of special role she was supposed to play. Emily wasn't a public speaker. She had never given a speech in front of anyone beyond a few casual acquaintances. And now, here she was, standing at the edge of the grand stage, everyone's eyes on her, the sudden focus of the entire room. For a moment, her breath caught in her throat. She could feel the weight of the situation bearing down on her. Was this part of some kind of game? Some kind of test? She scanned the crowd, her gaze flickering from one face to another, trying to make sense of the situation. But she couldn't read anyone's expression. They all looked the same, curious, expectant, maybe even a little too eager. And that's when it hit her. Something was off about this. This wasn't just a surprise, a simple call to the stage. There was a reason they had picked her. But why her? She had no ties to any of these people. She didn't belong in their world. As her heart pounded, she caught sight of a familiar face across the room. It was Michael, one of the waitstaff who had been there longer than her. He caught her eye, giving her a reassuring nod. But there was something about that nod that didn't sit right with her. It was too practiced, too controlled. Michael had always been friendly, but there was something in his demeanor now that seemed off, like he was hiding something. She wondered for a moment if maybe he knew more about this than he was letting on. But before she could dwell on it, the host's voice cut through her thoughts again, louder this time, and more insistent. "Come on, Emily. Don't be shy. We're all eager to hear from you." The crowd's eyes were on her now, and she could feel the weight of their gaze as if it were an invisible force pressing down on her chest. She couldn't back down now. With a deep breath, she stepped forward, unsure of what she was about to say, or why she was even standing there in the first place. But something inside her told her this moment was more than just a random occurrence. The questions were stacking up in her mind faster than she could answer them. Why was she chosen? What did they want from her? And most importantly, what was really going on behind the scenes of this extravagant, mysterious event? As she stood there, the host gave her a small but knowing smile, as though he was waiting for something. But waiting for what? The tension in the room had reached its peak, and every second felt like an eternity. Emily knew she had to speak. She had to say something, anything, to break the silence. But her mind was still spinning, trying to make sense of the confusion, the strange looks from the guests, and that nagging feeling that something was terribly wrong. She opened her mouth, and the words that came out next, well, they weren't what anyone expected. But the truth of what happened next? Well, that's a story for later. Because this is where things get even more complicated, and the deeper you dive, the more twisted it all becomes. As Emily stood on that stage, the room holding its collective breath, she suddenly realized that her words were more than just a fleeting moment of attention. Something was expected of her. Something beyond a simple, off-the-cuff speech. But as she tried to gather her thoughts, something inside her told her to be cautious. There was a hidden agenda here, one she wasn't yet aware of but could feel pressing against her from every side. She managed to stammer a few words, trying to keep her composure, but even as she spoke, her mind was racing. Why had they chosen her? Why was she the one they wanted to speak? There was something more to this situation than she could immediately grasp, and the tension in the air only made it worse. The crowd's eyes didn't just hold curiosity anymore, they were filled with expectation, a strange hunger. She felt exposed, like a pawn in someone else's game. After the speech, Emily was eager to slip back into the shadows, to blend back into her role as just another waitress. But that's when things started to spiral. The host, a man named Gregory, approached her after the applause died down, his smile too tight, his handshake too firm. He wasn't just being polite, He was sizing her up. And that made Emily's skin crawl. "Great job," he said, his voice low, almost too low for the setting. "You did well up there. You've got potential." But his words didn't sound like a compliment. They sounded like a warning, like he was marking her in some way, putting her on notice. She didn't know what exactly he meant by that, but something about his demeanor made her think twice. That night, after she finished her shift and the gala finally wound down, Emily's thoughts wouldn't settle. She tossed and turned in bed, replaying the events in her mind, piecing together the puzzle that didn't quite make sense. It was almost as if everyone in that room had been playing their part in some sort of performance, except she wasn't supposed to be there. And yet, now she was caught in the middle of something much bigger than she had ever anticipated. The next morning, Emily tried to put it all behind her, chalking it up to nerves, a strange night, and a weird experience. She returned to her normal routine, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. That feeling deepened when, a few days later, she found herself back at work, serving at another event. It was an unremarkable evening at first, until she was called into the back office by a manager who looked unusually serious. His name was Frank, a man who was usually jovial and quick with a joke, but today, his face was tight, his movements deliberate. "I need to talk to you about something," Frank said, his voice low, his gaze shifting nervously to the door behind him as if he was worried someone might overhear. "It's about the gala." Emily's stomach dropped. She'd hoped that after that night, she could just move on and forget it all. But it seemed that wasn't going to be the case. "What about it?" she asked, though she was already dreading the answer. Frank hesitated, taking a long breath. "I don't know how to put this, but there's something strange going on, Emily. Something I'm not supposed to talk about. Someone has been trying to cover their tracks, and it looks like you're in the middle of it." Emily's mind raced. Cover their tracks? What did that even mean? She didn't know what to say, so she just stood there, waiting for him to continue. Frank lowered his voice even further, practically whispering. "There was a file, a list of names, at the gala, something that was supposed to be sealed off, locked away. But after the event, it vanished. No one knows where it went. But I'm starting to think it had something to do with you." The words hit her like a cold slap. A file? A list of names? What was Frank talking about? She wasn't aware of any file, any list, anything that might have connected her to whatever shady dealings were happening behind the scenes. She tried to brush it off, but Frank's expression told her this was no idle gossip. He was serious. "Be careful," he said, his voice barely a whisper now. "You're involved in something you don't fully understand, and it's not safe for you to keep digging. People in power don't like when things get exposed. Trust me." With that, Frank left, leaving Emily standing in the small, dimly lit office, her head spinning. What was going on? What did she have to do with any of this? And why were people suddenly so interested in her? That was when the first warning came. The next night, as Emily walked home after another late shift, she noticed a car parked across the street, the engine idling, the lights off. At first, she thought it was just another person waiting to pick someone up, but then she realized the car hadn't moved in over an hour. And just as she turned onto her street, the headlights flared on, and the car sped off into the night. It was too quick to get a good look at the driver, but the feeling of being watched lingered. Emily's pulse quickened. Was someone following her now? Was this the same people who had orchestrated her involvement in the gala? And why? The next day, as she tried to get answers, Emily reached out to Michael, the friendly waitstaff member she'd seen the night of the gala. She called him, asking if he knew anything about the file or the strange occurrences she'd been hearing about. But when she spoke to him, his tone was cold, almost too cold for someone who had always been approachable. "I don't know what you're talking about, Emily," he said quickly. "It's probably nothing. Just drop it." The words were abrupt, and the line clicked off before she could say anything else. The conversation left her uneasy. Why would Michael, someone she thought she could trust, react like that? Could it be that he knew more than he was letting on? Was he involved in all this, and if so, how deep did it go? With every passing day, the stakes grew higher. Emily was caught in a web of secrecy, and the more she tried to untangle the threads, the more they seemed to pull her in. But each new piece of information only raised more questions. Who could she trust? What was the purpose of the mysterious file? And what had really happened at that gala? With every step she took closer to the truth, Emily could feel herself being drawn deeper into a conspiracy that threatened to swallow her whole. And the most terrifying part? She still didn't know who was behind it all or who was trying to stop her from finding out. Then, just when she thought she might finally have a lead, she received an anonymous message on her phone: "Stop digging. Or else." No name. No signature. Just a warning. And as the message lingered on the screen, Emily realized the real danger had only just begun. The message sat on Emily's phone like a ticking time bomb, its words lingering in her mind. Stop digging. Or else. It wasn't the kind of message you ignored, and as she stared at the screen, her heart raced. Whoever had sent it was serious, and it was clear now that they wanted her to back off. The stakes had just been raised, but Emily wasn't the type to give up easily. If anything, the warning only fueled her determination to find out what was really going on. The problem was, she didn't know who to trust anymore. The people she'd thought were just ordinary co-workers or acquaintances now seemed to have deeper connections to this shadowy world, and it was beginning to feel like everyone had their own agenda. Even the people closest to her seemed to be hiding something. But things took an even more unsettling turn when she learned that someone else, someone very close to her, was now caught in the crossfire. Her best friend, Lily, had always been her rock, the one person Emily could count on through thick and thin. They'd met years ago when they both worked at a small cafe downtown, and over the years, their bond had only grown stronger. Lily knew more about Emily's past than anyone else, and Emily had always trusted her completely. But one evening, just a day after the anonymous message had landed on Emily's phone, Lily came over to Emily's apartment looking pale and frantic. She was holding her phone in her hand, her fingers trembling, and when she looked up at Emily, her eyes were wide with fear. I need to show you something," Lily said, her voice tight. "I don't know how this happened, but someone sent me a message, too." Emily's blood ran cold. Lily hadn't been involved in the gala. She wasn't part of the strange events that had been unfolding around Emily, and yet now it seemed like she was being dragged into it all. Emily felt a chill creep up her spine as Lily handed over the phone, showing her a message identical to the one Emily had received. "Stop digging. Or else." There it was again, the same cryptic warning, as if whoever was behind it all had made it clear that no one was safe. Emily felt a sense of urgency that she hadn't felt before. This wasn't just about her anymore, Lily was in danger now, too. And the more Emily thought about it, the more she realized that the gala, the mysterious file, and the cryptic messages were all somehow connected. But to what? What did the person or people who were threatening her and now Lily want? It was impossible to ignore the growing realization that the danger was escalating, and every move Emily made only seemed to push her deeper into a web of lies and deceit. The unsettling feeling that she was being watched only intensified in the days that followed. At first, it had been the car following her, the strange men in the shadows. But now, even in her own apartment, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. Items were misplaced, and her things were slightly out of order, nothing big, but enough to make her question whether someone had been inside while she wasn't looking. The sense of violation was overwhelming, and it made her uneasy in her own home. Then, one evening, after a long day of work, Emily found something unexpected. She had been going through some old papers, trying to clear out her desk, when she came across a receipt from the gala. At first, she didn't think much of it. It had been slipped into a folder of miscellaneous papers she hadn't even noticed before. But when she took a closer look, she froze. The date and time on the receipt matched up perfectly with the exact moment she had been called to the stage to speak. But what caught her off guard wasn't just the timing, it was the name on the receipt. It was her name. Emily's name was listed as a guest, someone who was supposed to be there in a different capacity. She wasn't just a waitress. She was listed as an invited guest, one of the special attendees for the evening. How had this slip of paper ended up in her possession? And why had no one told her she was supposed to be more than just a server at the gala? Emily's mind raced as she thought back to the night of the event. She could hardly remember being told anything about being an actual guest. She was just there to do her job, just like always. But the receipt didn't lie. And now the questions came flooding in. Who had invited her? Why had they hidden this information from her? And who else knew about her connection to the event that she had been unaware of? There was something deeply unsettling about the realization that she had been kept in the dark about her role at the gala, and now she was starting to wonder if she had been part of something far bigger than she could have imagined. But just as Emily was beginning to make connections, another curveball was thrown her way. She was in a cafe, meeting with Lily to discuss the latest developments, when a figure from her past unexpectedly walked through the door. It was Michael, the waiter who had seemed so friendly at first but whose behavior had grown increasingly suspicious. Emily had been wondering about him ever since their last conversation, where he'd brushed off her concerns and shut her down with an uncharacteristic coldness. But now, there he was, standing in front of them, a faint but unmistakable smirk on his face. He wasn't alone. He was with a man Emily didn't recognize, someone who had a dangerous look in his eyes, someone whose presence immediately sent a chill down Emily's spine. Michael approached their table, but there was no warmth in his eyes now, no trace of the easygoing demeanor he had once had. "I think we need to talk," he said, his voice low, his words laced with something that didn't sit right. "You've been asking too many questions, Emily. It's time you understood that some things are better left alone." His companion stood silently behind him, his eyes scanning the cafe, as if looking for potential threats. Emily's heart pounded in her chest. This wasn't just a friendly chat. It was a warning. She had been digging too deep, and now she was getting too close to something that wasn't meant to be uncovered. Lily shifted uneasily in her seat, her face pale as she glanced between Emily and Michael. "What's going on?" she asked, her voice trembling. But Michael didn't answer. Instead, he just nodded to the man behind him, who reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. "This is your last warning," he said coldly, dropping the envelope on the table before turning and walking away with Michael. Emily's breath caught in her throat as she stared at the envelope, the tension thick in the air. What could this mean? What was in that envelope? She didn't want to open it, but she had no choice. Slowly, she reached for the envelope, her hands shaking as she pulled it open. Inside, she found a single piece of paper, nothing written on it, but the unmistakable feeling of something hidden within the folds. As Emily stared at the paper, the weight of the situation became clear. This was just another piece of the puzzle, but it was one she didn't know how to solve. And as the days went on, the deeper she went, the more dangerous it became. Every answer seemed to lead to more questions, and every step forward felt like a step into a darker, more complex web of mystery and deception. With the threat looming over her, and her trust in everyone she knew crumbling, Emily realized that the truth was just beyond her reach, and the more she tried to uncover it, the more it seemed to slip away, like sand through her fingers. But one thing was certain, whoever was behind all this was watching her every move, and they weren't going to let her uncover the truth without a fight. The envelope in Emily's hands trembled, its weight almost suffocating, as if it carried more than just a simple message. She sat there for a moment, staring at the blank sheet inside, her mind racing to make sense of it. The paper felt cold, sterile, as if it was mocking her confusion. She could feel Lily's eyes on her, waiting for her to make sense of what was happening. But Emily didn't have an answer, and in that moment, she felt more powerless than she ever had before. The tension that had been slowly building over the past few days now felt like it was closing in on her, like the walls of her life were starting to constrict, piece by piece. She looked up from the paper and met Lily's gaze, her heart pounding. "What does it mean?" Lily whispered, her voice barely audible, as if the question itself might bring something terrible into the air. Before Emily could respond, the lights in the cafe flickered, a sudden gust of wind rattling the windows, and the noise of the bustling room around them seemed to fade. Everything felt too quiet, too still. It wasn't a coincidence. Emily could feel it in her bones, something was wrong. She stood up abruptly, clutching the envelope in her hand, her mind screaming at her to leave, to run, to get out of there before whatever this was could reach them. But as she turned to glance around, she noticed something that made her blood run cold. "But I couldn't keep lying to you. The truth is, I'm not who you think I am." Everything around Emily seemed to tilt, as if the world had suddenly turned upside down. She felt a wave of dizziness pass over her as she tried to make sense of Lily's confession. Her best friend, the one person she had trusted more than anyone, had been lying to her the entire time. The bond they had built, the countless hours they had spent talking about the mystery, the support Lily had given her, it had all been a facade. Michael's gaze didn't leave Emily's face. He was watching her with the intensity of someone who knew exactly what was happening inside her head. Lily's been playing both sides, he said, his voice low, almost like a whisper. She's been feeding you information, but only what she wanted you to know. The rest, she's kept that hidden. She's been working with us all along, Emily. And now it's time for you to choose. You can stay in the dark, or you can face the truth. But you'll have to make a choice soon. It won't be easy. And it might cost you everything. The world spun around Emily. She felt lightheaded, like she might collapse any second. The reality of what Michael was saying hit her like a freight train. Everything she had believed, every piece of the puzzle she had been putting together, had been a lie. She wasn't the one uncovering the truth. She had been the pawn in a much bigger game. And Lily had been part of the plan all along. Emily stumbled back, shaking her head. No. You're lying. You have to be lying. She turned to Lily, pleading with her to deny it. Tell me it's not true. Tell me you're not involved in this. But Lily only looked at her, her face filled with sorrow and regret. I didn't have a choice, Emily, she whispered. I didn't want to hurt you, but I had to. I've been trying to protect you from the worst part of all this. But now it's too late. They're coming for both of us, whether we're ready or not. Emily felt the weight of those words crash down on her. She wasn't just caught in a web of danger anymore. She was part of it. She had been manipulated from the start, and now there was no way out. The people she had trusted, the ones who had been guiding her along the way, were the very ones pulling the strings. And as the full realization of her situation sank in, Emily understood just how deep this rabbit hole went and how much worse it was about to get. The truth was even darker than she could have ever imagined, and there was no turning back now. The questions she had been asking were nothing compared to the answers that were waiting to destroy everything she thought she knew. And as Michael's cold gaze pierced through her, Emily knew that the most terrifying part of it all was yet to come. The air in the street felt suffocating, thick with tension, as Emily stood there, the weight of everything pressing down on her. She had no idea how long she had been standing, frozen in shock, staring at Lily and Michael, but it felt like hours. The cold wind had stopped biting her skin, but the chill inside her chest was far worse. Everything she thought she knew about the people closest to her, about her life, her past, had shattered into 1,000 sharp pieces. The darkness was closing in, and she didn't know how to escape it. Her mind was swirling with questions, but the answers she had spent so long searching for now seemed irrelevant. She didn't care about the mystery anymore. She cared about the people she had trusted. Lily's face was pale, her eyes filled with guilt and sorrow, but there was something else there too. Fear. Emily could see it now, lurking beneath the surface of her best friend's normally calm demeanor. And Michael, standing in front of her like some sort of grim sentinel, looked eerily calm, as though he had expected this confrontation all along. As if it was part of the plan. It felt like a game where Emily was the one who had been blindfolded and shoved into the maze, unable to see where the walls were, unable to see who was really controlling it all. She had trusted Lily to be her ally, and now that trust had been ripped away. Emily, Lily's voice cracked, pulling her from the dark spiral of thoughts that were threatening to swallow her. I didn't want this to happen. I didn't want you to be in danger, but you're already in it. The moment you started looking into the gala, everything changed. You're too far in now, and I can't protect you anymore. Her words were rushed, her breath coming out in short, panicked bursts. Emily felt a sickening twist in her stomach as the weight of Lily's betrayal sank in deeper. It wasn't just the lies, it was the realization that Lily had always known more than she had let on. And now, she was saying that she couldn't help anymore. What do you mean, you can't protect me anymore? Emily's voice was barely above a whisper, but it felt like a scream in her ears. Lily, you're the one who brought me into this. You were the one who told me I could trust you. All these lies, all these secrets, they're destroying me. Her voice cracked as the truth, The depth of everything that had been hidden from her hit her like a wave. Every fiber of her being screamed for answers, but none were coming. The silence that followed felt like it was closing in on her, suffocating her with the weight of the decisions she had to make. Michael stepped forward, his face grim and unreadable. "It's not about protection anymore," he said quietly, his eyes never leaving hers. "It's about survival." Emily felt her breath catch in her throat as the words sank in. "You're part of this now, Emily. There's no going back. The people behind all this, the ones pulling the strings, they won't stop until they've gotten what they want. And you're in the way." Emily recoiled, her mind racing. Survival? What did that even mean? She had thought she was just solving a mystery. She had thought it was all about uncovering the truth. But this was something else entirely. She had crossed a line she didn't know existed. She wasn't just a bystander anymore. She was in the middle of something dark, something dangerous, and now, it was demanding a price she wasn't sure she could pay. Lily stepped forward, her eyes pleading now. "Please, Emily. You need to listen to him. I know you want to know the truth, but some truths are too dangerous to uncover. You don't know what you're up against. The people involved in this, they have power. They'll stop at nothing to make sure their secrets stay buried. And if you keep digging, if you keep going down this path, they'll come after you, and they won't stop until they've destroyed everything you love." The words hit Emily harder than anything Michael had said. Everything Lily said made sense, but at the same time, it felt like a lie. Could she really stop now? Could she walk away from the truth, from everything she had fought for, just because it was too dangerous? Emily's heart felt like it was being torn in two. The pull of curiosity, of wanting to know everything, the urge to understand, was still there, strong and unyielding. But what if Lily was right? What if the truth was more than she could handle? What if it wasn't just her life that was at risk, but everyone around her? And then, just as Emily was about to speak, to ask for answers, Michael's voice interrupted again, this time more forceful, more demanding. "I'm giving you a choice, Emily. You can walk away. Leave it all behind, forget this ever happened, and we'll make sure you're safe. We'll make sure no one comes after you. But if you choose to keep digging, to keep going after the truth, then understand this. You'll lose everything. Everyone you care about will be dragged into this mess, and it won't be just your life on the line anymore. It'll be theirs too." Emily felt her knees grow weak, and for a moment, she thought she might collapse right there on the street. Everything was closing in on her, the mystery, the lies, the danger. She had spent so long trying to uncover the truth, but now, the truth was asking her to make an impossible decision. Was it worth it? Was the truth worth sacrificing everything she had, everyone she loved? The people who had been by her side, who had trusted her, would they even be safe if she kept going? And if she stopped now, would she ever be able to live with the unanswered questions that would haunt her for the rest of her life? Her breath came in sharp gasps, the weight of the choice heavy in her chest. The silence between them felt like an eternity. She could feel the eyes of both Lily and Michael on her, waiting, expecting her to make a decision. The future, her future, seemed to hang in the balance, suspended between two impossible choices, to protect herself and walk away, or to keep chasing the truth, knowing that the consequences might be far more devastating than she could imagine. In that moment, Emily realized something terrifying. No matter what she chose, there was no going back. If she kept going, if she dug deeper, she would change everything. She would change herself. And if she walked away, she would have to live with the knowledge that the answers she so desperately sought would forever remain out of reach, like a door she could never open. Her heart raced as she looked at both of them, the uncertainty weighing on her. The darkness was closing in faster than she could comprehend, and with every passing second, the stakes grew higher. What would she choose? What was the right choice, when both options felt like a descent into something she couldn't control? The answer wasn't clear. And that terrified her even more than the mystery itself. The longer she stood there, the more it felt like time was slipping away, the tension growing so thick it seemed to crackle in the air. And somewhere, deep inside, Emily knew that the choice she made tonight would determine the rest of her life. But no matter which path she chose, it would come with a price. The weight of the decision pressed on Emily like a heavy cloak, suffocating and impossible to shake off. Every moment that passed felt like another second lost, another step deeper into a world that had quickly spiraled beyond her control. She couldn't breathe. The truth, the real truth, seemed to hang just out of reach, but the closer she got to it, the more dangerous the road became. Her heart pounded in her chest, her mind racing in 1,000 directions. The threat was real. The stakes were higher than she had ever imagined. And yet, in the midst of it all, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that someone was pulling the strings from the shadows, orchestrating this chaos. Lily stood frozen, her face pale, her eyes full of regret. But Emily could feel it now, something deeper in the air, a tension that didn't belong to just her and Lily. It was as if the entire world around her had shifted, revealing something darker, something that went beyond the lies she had been told. And that's when it hit her, she wasn't alone in this. She had been so focused on the people close to her, on Lily and Michael, that she hadn't considered the broader scope of the conspiracy. The reach of this web stretched far beyond their small circle. The people who were pulling the strings were everywhere, hidden in plain sight, disguised as allies, friends, even strangers. Her mind flashed back to everything she had uncovered, all the pieces of the puzzle she had been piecing together. The gala, the strange messages, the cryptic phone calls, these were only fragments of a much larger picture. And now, Emily was standing on the edge of a cliff, her feet teetering between the choice to fall into the unknown or to fight her way out, even if it meant losing everything. But even as she tried to piece things together, a new truth began to form, one that shook her to her core. What if Lily wasn't just an unwilling participant? What if she was the one who had been manipulating Emily all along? Without thinking, Emily spun around to face Lily. Her voice was low but full of conviction as she asked, "How long, Lily? How long have you been lying to me?" Lily flinched at the question, her gaze dropping to the ground as if she couldn't meet Emily's eyes anymore. "I never meant to hurt you," she whispered, but there was something hollow in her voice, something missing. "You need to understand, Emily. It was always bigger than just us. I didn't have a choice." The words, the guilt in her tone, might have sounded sincere to anyone else, but to Emily, they felt like a mask, one that had begun to slip. There was something wrong with the way Lily was speaking, something that made Emily's blood run cold. She stepped closer, her voice rising with the intensity of her emotions. "Tell me the truth, Lily. I want the whole truth. I don't care about the lies anymore. Who else is involved? Who else is working against me?" But before Lily could respond, Emily heard it, a sound, faint but growing louder, like a low hum from the distance. Her heart skipped a beat as she realized it wasn't just the wind. Someone else was here. And they were closing in. "Michael," Emily said sharply, her voice trembling. "What's going on? What are you?" Before she could finish the sentence, the sound of heavy footsteps grew louder, too fast, too precise. The air seemed to grow thicker, more oppressive, as Emily's instincts kicked into overdrive. Someone else was out there. And they weren't alone. In an instant, Emily realized the danger wasn't just from one person. It wasn't just about the secrets Lily and Michael were hiding. The entire world around her was complicit in this. Every person who had come and gone, every ally she thought she had, were all part of the same twisted game. Michael's face twisted into something unreadable as he stepped back, his eyes darting around as if anticipating something. "You don't get it, Emily," he said, his voice low and strained. "You're too late. It's not just us anymore. The web you're tangled in, it's far deeper than you ever thought." Emily's pulse hammered in her ears as the footsteps grew louder. Her heart raced, every instinct telling her to run, to escape, to get out of this maze before it was too late. But there was nowhere to go. She was cornered. And as she looked back at Lily, she saw it, the truth in her eyes, the secret they had both been hiding. The truth wasn't just that Emily had stumbled too far down a dangerous path. The truth was that everyone she had trusted was working against her, and the people who were pulling the strings had been watching her every move, waiting for her to fall into their trap. The footsteps were almost upon them now, and the realization struck her like a blow to the chest. And then, just as Emily was about to speak, to ask for answers, Michael's voice interrupted again, this time more forceful, more demanding. "I'm giving you a choice, Emily. You can walk away. Leave it all behind, forget this ever happened, and we'll make sure you're safe. We'll make sure no one comes after you. But if you choose to keep digging, to keep going after the truth, then understand this: you'll lose everything. Everyone you care about will be dragged into this mess, and it won't be just your life on the line anymore. It'll be theirs too. Emily felt her knees grow weak, and for a moment, she thought she might collapse right there on the street. Everything was closing in on her: the mystery, the lies, the danger. She had spent so long trying to uncover the truth, but now, the truth was asking her to make an impossible decision. Was it worth it? Was the truth worth sacrificing everything she had, everyone she loved? The people who had been by her side, who had trusted her, would they even be safe if she kept going? And if she stopped now, would she ever be able to live with the unanswered questions that would haunt her for the rest of her life? Her breath came in sharp gasps, the weight of the choice heavy in her chest. The silence between them felt like an eternity. She could feel the eyes of both Lily and Michael on her, waiting, expecting her to make a decision. The future, her future, seemed to hang in the balance, suspended between two impossible choices: to protect herself and walk away, or to keep chasing the truth, knowing that the consequences might be far more devastating than she could imagine. In that moment, Emily realized something terrifying. No matter what she chose, there was no going back. If she kept going, if she dug deeper, she would change everything. She would change herself. And if she walked away, she would have to live with the knowledge that the answers she so desperately sought would forever remain out of reach, like a door she could never open. Her heart raced as she looked at both of them, the uncertainty weighing on her. The darkness was closing in faster than she could comprehend, and with every passing second, the stakes grew higher. What would she choose? What was the right choice, when both options felt like a descent into something she couldn't control? The answer wasn't clear. And that terrified her even more than the mystery itself. The longer she stood there, the more it felt like time was slipping away, the tension growing so thick it seemed to crackle in the air. And somewhere, deep inside, Emily knew that the choice she made tonight would determine the rest of her life. But no matter which path she chose, it would come with a price. The weight of the decision pressed on Emily like a heavy cloak, suffocating and impossible to shake off. Every moment that passed felt like another second lost, another step deeper into a world that had quickly spiraled beyond her control. She couldn't breathe. The truth, the real truth, seemed to hang just out of reach, but the closer she got to it, the more dangerous the road became. Her heart pounded in her chest, her mind racing in 1,000 directions. The threat was real. The stakes were higher than she had ever imagined. And yet, in the midst of it all, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that someone was pulling the strings from the shadows, orchestrating this chaos. Lily stood frozen, her face pale, her eyes full of regret. But Emily could feel it now, something deeper in the air, a tension that didn't belong to just her and Lily. It was as if the entire world around her had shifted, revealing something darker, something that went beyond the lies she had been told. And that's when it hit her: she wasn't alone in this. She had been so focused on the people close to her, on Lily and Michael, that she hadn't considered the broader scope of the conspiracy. The reach of this web stretched far beyond their small circle. The people who were pulling the strings were everywhere, hidden in plain sight, disguised as allies, friends, even strangers. Her mind flashed back to everything she had uncovered, all the pieces of the puzzle she had been piecing together. The gala, the strange messages, the cryptic phone calls, these were only fragments of a much larger picture. And now, Emily was standing on the edge of a cliff, her feet teetering between the choice to fall into the unknown or to fight her way out, even if it meant losing everything. But even as she tried to piece things together, a new truth began to form, one that shook her to her core. What if Lily wasn't just an unwilling participant? What if she was the one who had been manipulating Emily all along? Without thinking, Emily spun around to face Lily. Her voice was low but full of conviction as she asked, "How long, Lily? How long have you been lying to me?" Lily flinched at the question, her gaze dropping to the ground as if she couldn't meet Emily's eyes anymore. "I never meant to hurt you," she whispered, but there was something hollow in her voice, something missing. "You need to understand, Emily. It was always bigger than just us. I didn't have a choice." The words, the guilt in her tone, might have sounded sincere to anyone else, but to Emily, They felt like a mask, one that had begun to slip. There was something wrong with the way Lily was speaking, something that made Emily's blood run cold. She stepped closer, her voice rising with the intensity of her emotions. "Tell me the truth, Lily. I want the whole truth. I don't care about the lies anymore. Who else is involved? Who else is working against me?" But before Lily could respond, Emily heard it, a sound, faint but growing louder, like a low hum from the distance. Her heart skipped a beat as she realized it wasn't just the wind. Someone else was here. And they were closing in. "Michael," Emily said sharply, her voice trembling. "What's going on? What are you?" Before she could finish the sentence, the sound of heavy footsteps grew louder, too fast, too precise. The air seemed to grow thicker, more oppressive, as Emily's instincts kicked into overdrive. Someone else was out there. And they weren't alone. In an instant, Emily realized the danger wasn't just from one person. It wasn't just about the secrets Lily and Michael were hiding. The entire world around her was complicit in this. Every person who had come and gone, every ally she thought she had, were all part of the same twisted game. Michael's face twisted into something unreadable as he stepped back, his eyes darting around as if anticipating something. "You don't get it, Emily," he said, his voice low and strained. "You're too late. It's not just us anymore. The web you're tangled in, it's far deeper than you ever thought." Emily's pulse hammered in her ears as the footsteps grew louder. Her heart raced, every instinct telling her to run, to escape, to get out of this maze before it was too late. But there was nowhere to go. She was cornered. And as she looked back at Lily, she saw it, the truth in her eyes, the secret they had both been hiding. The truth wasn't just that Emily had stumbled too far down a dangerous path. The truth was that everyone she had trusted was working against her, and the people who were pulling the strings had been watching her every move, waiting for her to fall into their trap. The footsteps were almost upon them now, and the realization struck her like a blow to the chest. It wasn't just Lily or Michael who had been playing a game. It was everyone. The gala, the messages, the threats, they were all distractions. Distractions from the real plan. The real conspiracy was much bigger, and Emily was nothing more than a pawn in a much larger scheme. The walls were closing in, and there was no escape. They had been leading her down this path all along, and now she was stuck in the middle of a storm she couldn't control. As the first shadow stepped into view, Emily's heart skipped a beat. A figure emerged from the darkness, tall and imposing, their face hidden in the shadows. Emily's pulse raced as she realized this person wasn't just anyone. This was the one person she never expected to see. This was the person she had trusted the most. "Ryan," she breathed, her voice cracking as her worst fear was realized. The person who had been her closest ally, her confidant, the one who had supported her through the worst of it, now stood in front of her, a cold, emotionless expression on his face. She couldn't believe it. She couldn't comprehend it. Ryan looked at her with the same detached look he had worn when they first met, a look that now felt like a mask, like a lie she had missed all along. He took a step closer, his voice barely audible as he said, "It's time, Emily. You've come this far, but it's over now. The people behind this, they've made their decision. You're either with us, or you're against us." Everything in Emily's world seemed to crack open in that moment, the floodgates of realization pouring in. Ryan had been part of this. He had been part of the conspiracy from the very beginning. Every step she had taken, every decision she had made, had been part of their plan. Her mind reeled, unable to process the sheer magnitude of it all. "How could you?" she whispered, her voice full of disbelief and betrayal. But Ryan didn't flinch. He didn't show any emotion. He just stood there, cold and unyielding, a silent participant in a game far bigger than anything she could have ever imagined. The final pieces of the puzzle were falling into place, but the picture they formed was one of nightmare. The conspiracy wasn't just about the gala. It wasn't just about the messages and the threats. It was about something darker, something more dangerous, something that involved people she had trusted, people she had believed in, people she never could have imagined were working against her. And now, as the storm closed in, Emily realized that the battle she had been fighting wasn't just about uncovering the truth anymore. It was about surviving it. And that survival was looking less and less likely with every passing second. The stakes were higher than she had ever thought, and now, as the final confrontation loomed on the horizon, she could only pray that she could hold onto the shreds of herself that hadn't been lost to the darkness. Emily stood in the cold, the weight of everything pressing down on her chest, suffocating her with the enormity of what she was about to face. The final pieces of the puzzle had fallen into place, but the picture they formed was one she never could have imagined, twisted, dark, and beyond her control. She had trusted the wrong people. She had chased a lie, followed false leads, and all along, there had been someone watching her, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. And now, as she stood in front of Ryan, the person she thought she could trust more than anyone, the truth hit her like a tidal wave. "You don't get it, Emily," Ryan said, his voice low, almost apologetic, as if he were explaining something simple, something she should have understood all along. "It's never been about you. You were just a tool, a means to an end. All this time, you thought you were solving a mystery, but the mystery was only ever about controlling you. You never had a chance." The words sliced through her, and for a moment, she was numb, unable to comprehend the full extent of his betrayal. She had thought they were allies, that Ryan had been on her side through it all, helping her uncover the truth about the gala, about the people pulling the strings. But now, standing face to face with him, she realized how wrong she had been. Every conversation, every moment they'd shared, it had all been part of the manipulation. "Why?" Emily's voice cracked, raw with disbelief. "Why would you do this? I trusted you. I thought we were in this together. You promised me you would help me find the truth. But this is a lie." Ryan's eyes flickered with something that almost resembled regret, but it was gone in an instant. His expression hardened, and he took a step closer, his presence imposing, like a shadow looming over her. "The truth. The truth is a luxury, Emily. The people behind this, our bosses, they don't care about the truth. They care about control. Power. You were never meant to know any of this. You're just a small part of something much bigger. And now that you're in the way, there's only one thing left to do." Emily's heart raced as the weight of his words sank in. She had been used. Her investigation had been nothing more than a distraction, a carefully constructed illusion. The gala, the strange messages, the missing clues, it had all been part of the plan to lead her to this moment. She had been chasing shadows, unaware that the real enemy had been right in front of her the entire time. The realization hit her hard, but the anger that followed was even stronger. She wasn't going to let him walk away from this. She wasn't going to let him win. In a blur of motion, Emily reached into her bag, her fingers brushing against the cold metal of the small device she'd been hiding since the night of the gala. She hadn't been sure of its significance at first, but now, it was the key. It was the final piece she needed to expose everything. The evidence that would shatter the entire conspiracy wide open. Ryan's eyes narrowed as he saw her make the move, but it was too late. Emily pulled out the device, slamming it onto the ground between them. The small screen flickered to life, revealing a video file, a recording of a conversation, one she had stumbled upon earlier in her search, hidden deep within the archives of the gala's planning documents. The file had been encrypted, locked away, but now it was on display for both of them to see. "Do you think this will change anything?" Ryan sneered, his voice dripping with scorn. But Emily didn't back down. She didn't flinch. She kept her eyes locked on the screen, watching the footage play out, the chilling voices of her supposed allies echoing through the room. The video showed several prominent figures, faces she recognized from the gala, the very same people she thought were there to help, now conspiring in the shadows. And then, the one name that changed everything, her own. They were discussing her. The entire conspiracy had been about her, about manipulating her every move, about drawing her into this world of lies and deception. The recording revealed that Ryan had been the one orchestrating it all, pulling the strings from behind the scenes. He had been using her to get closer to the truth, to manipulate her into unknowingly doing their bidding. "That's it," Emily said quietly, her voice steady, despite the chaos raging inside her. "This is where it ends, Ryan. You've been controlling everything from the start, but it's over now. I have proof. And you're not getting away with this." Ryan's face twisted in fury as he lunged forward, his hands grabbing her by the shoulders, shaking her violently. "You think you've won? You think this changes anything? You're nothing, Emily. You're just a pawn in a game that's much bigger than you. The moment you decided to dig deeper, you sealed your fate. It's too late for you. It's too late for all of us. His words were venomous, filled with a desperation that sent a cold shiver down Emily's spine. But she wasn't afraid anymore. She had come too far to back down now. The darkness that had been haunting her for so long was finally making sense, but there was still one thing left to uncover, one last piece of the puzzle that Emily hadn't yet seen. In a flash, the door to the room burst open, and another figure entered, someone she hadn't expected to see at all. Her heart stopped when she saw who it was, Lily. But something was different. Her expression was cold, distant, and her eyes were empty. She wasn't the same person Emily had known. "You're too late, Emily," Lily said flatly, her voice devoid of emotion. "This was never meant to be your fight. You were just a tool, a distraction. Now, it's over. There's nothing left for you here." Emily's mind reeled as the truth began to hit her all over again, harder this time. Lily wasn't just an innocent bystander. She had been part of it too, working with Ryan, playing her role in this twisted game. Emily had been right all along. Everyone she had trusted was involved in this conspiracy. The walls seemed to close in as the reality of the situation set in. She had uncovered the truth, but it had come at a cost she hadn't anticipated. The truth wasn't freeing, it was a prison. And now, she had to make one final choice: to escape with the evidence, to expose everything to the world, or to leave it all behind and walk away, knowing the danger that lurked just beyond the horizon. Ryan's grip tightened, his eyes burning with rage. "You think you can stop this? You think you can walk away? You have no idea what you're dealing with. You're just a speck in the grand scheme of things, Emily." The words hung in the air as Emily stood there, her heart racing, the room spinning with uncertainty. The final twist had come, and the battle wasn't over. The stakes had only risen higher. She wasn't just fighting for the truth anymore. She was fighting for her life. The final moments passed in a blur of adrenaline and fear as Emily made her choice. She reached for the device, her hand trembling as she activated the final trigger. The screen blinked to life, and the room erupted in chaos. The truth was out. But now, the real battle was just beginning. The world felt surreal as Emily stood there, staring at the aftermath of everything that had just unfolded. The device in her hand had done its job. The truth was out, the evidence was out in the world, but in that moment, she couldn't help but feel a strange sense of emptiness. The chaos had finally stopped, but it was replaced by an eerie silence, one that hung in the air like a cloud of smoke, impossible to escape. Everything she had fought for, everything she had uncovered, now lay out in the open. Ryan, Lily, and the others were arrested, their plans shattered by the very thing they had tried so hard to keep hidden. But Emily didn't feel victorious. She didn't feel like she had won. There was no sense of triumph in exposing the conspiracy, no rush of satisfaction at seeing the people who had betrayed her finally face justice. In fact, all she felt was a profound, lingering emptiness. The truth had been more brutal than she had imagined. The web they had spun was vast, and it wasn't just about the gala or the messages. It was about power, control, and manipulation on a scale that left her reeling. She had been a pawn in a game that stretched far beyond her, beyond anyone she had ever known. The deeper she had dug, the darker it had become, and now, even though she had uncovered everything, she was left with the question of what was left for her. She had peeled back the layers, only to find that the world she thought she knew was built on lies. But in the aftermath, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that she had been left standing on the edge of something much bigger. Something that hadn't fully revealed itself yet. Days passed in a blur. The news cycle shifted, but the sting of betrayal lingered. The arrests were made, the conspirators tried and convicted, but Emily couldn't let go of the feeling that there was still something missing. She spent hours in her apartment, staring at the walls, the faces of those who had once been so close to her now nothing more than ghosts. The world had moved on, and she had gone from being a simple waitress at a gala to a key player in a story much bigger than she could have ever imagined. But as much as she wanted to, she couldn't find peace. The story had ended, but Emily was still trapped in the aftermath. She was standing by the window, the city stretching out beneath her, when the phone rang. The number was unlisted, and for a moment, Emily hesitated. She had learned to trust her instincts, and something told her this wasn't just a random call. She answered the phone, her voice tight, wary. "Hello." There was a pause, a crackling sound, and then a voice she recognized, but one that made her skin crawl with dread. "Emily, I'm sorry we had to meet like this, but there's something you need to know." Her breath caught in her throat. It was Michael. But this wasn't the Michael she had known. This was someone else, someone with a tone that sent a chill through her bones. "What do you want?" she demanded, her voice shaking. The voice on the other end was calm, but there was a darkness beneath it. "I'm sure you think it's over, but it's not. What you uncovered, it was just the beginning. You think you've exposed everything, but there's so much more you haven't seen. The conspiracy wasn't just about us. It's bigger, Emily. It's everywhere." Her heart raced, her blood turning to ice. She tried to steady her breathing, but it was like the world had tilted off its axis. "What are you talking about? It's over. You're done." Michael laughed, the sound unsettling in its coldness. "You think we were the only ones? You think Ryan was the mastermind? No, Emily. He was just a pawn too. And now you've made yourself a target. There are people out there who will never stop coming for you. It's not just about the gala anymore. It's about what you know. What you've seen. And believe me when I say, you don't even know half of it." The line went dead, leaving Emily standing in her apartment, the weight of his words crashing down on her. Her fingers shook as she held the phone, her mind racing. The conspiracy she had uncovered was only the surface. There were more players. More people with power, with control. The whole world she had thought she knew was still a lie, and she had only peeled back the smallest layer. There was so much more beneath the surface, things she couldn't even begin to fathom. Emily sank down onto the couch, her hands trembling. She had thought she had found the truth, but now, she realized it was just the beginning. The game wasn't over. It had only just started. She had been a player, yes, but she was still in the dark, still a part of something much larger. The conspiracy was bigger than she had ever imagined. And the moment she had stepped into it, there was no going back. As she sat in the silence of her apartment, the city lights twinkling outside like 1,000 hidden secrets, Emily realized something that sent a cold shiver down her spine. The danger wasn't over. She was still being watched. And now, more than ever, she knew that the people she had trusted, the people she thought were gone, finished, were still out there, still playing their game. But what was the endgame? What did they want from her? And what had she missed? The phone call had left her with more questions than answers, and now, there was no escaping it. She had thought she had won, but now she understood that the battle was far from over. And the deeper she had dug, the more she realized that the shadows were longer than she could have ever imagined. She could never go back to the life she once knew. She was too deep now, too entangled in the lies. And as the world outside continued to spin, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that she was still in the middle of a game she didn't fully understand. The question wasn't whether she had uncovered the truth, it was whether she was ready for the consequences of knowing it. The stakes had just been raised higher, and Emily knew that no matter what she did next, she would never be the same again. As the phone slipped from her hand and landed with a soft thud on the couch, she stared into the darkness outside, her mind swirling with the weight of everything that had happened. And in the distance, she could almost hear the echoes of the game that was far from over. The real mystery had just begun.